taking that one?
This is here. You can see that okay?
Sure.
It'll get bigger once I start. Okay. Is the camera good? Okay. Okay, so thanks again, everybody, for coming. Just on the format, it's going to be about an hour. We'll start with 2 minutes opening statements for each candidate. I flipped a coin earlier, and Jimmy Bierman is going to start with his opening statement, and then we'll switch which candidate answers each question first. We're going to do about 45 minutes or so of pre-prepared questions, which were mostly when I sent out a request for questions to committee members, and much of the questions came from that. We combined some. We tried to incorporate as much as possible. Of course, we can't ask every single question because we're limited on time. Once we finish with that, we'll allow 15 minutes for questions from the audience. And again, it'll be the same format. We'll flip-flop who answers the question first. For each question, each candidate will get 2 minutes to respond, 2 minutes, and then each will get a 30-second rebuttal. And then at the end, we'll do closing statements, 2 minutes each. And that will be it. So, are we ready to get started? Okay, so we'll begin with opening statements, and Jimmy Bierman has the first one.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for putting this together, Dranesville District Democratic Committee. And thank you, everyone who came out for this important discussion of who is going to be our Democratic nominee for Dranesville District Supervisor. My name's Jimmy Bierman, and I'm a local boy. I grew up about 10 minutes down the road out Old Dominion Drive. And I grew up in a dyed-in-the-wool Democratic household where we believed that in a democracy, the government is supposed to be responsive to and reflective of the people. It's about solving our collective action problems and trying to make your lives just a little bit better every single day. And like most erstwhile DMV politicos growing up in this area, I spent a lot of my childhood, a lot of my early career, a lot of my later career, looking across the river at the federal government and thinking that that's where I wanted to be. And I finally ended up there. I'm a lawyer, and I ended up at the Department of Homeland Security in the Office of the General Counsel, practicing administrative law, trying to get a big government agency to follow its own rules and run more smoothly. And I loved it. It was challenging and it was exciting. But even before I got there, I started realizing that that wasn't where I wanted to be. I started realizing that all the major issues facing America today, things that I care about, whether it's protecting our environment and fighting climate change, or having a great education system, or building communities safe from gun violence, or policing and public safety, it all needed good, strong stewardship and leadership right here at this level. I was sitting on the Fairfax County Police Civilian Review Panel at the time that George Floyd was murdered. And that's what really clicked for me. We don't have one national police force. We've got 18,000 individual police forces. And this is where I wanted to be. I chaired the Dranesville District Democratic Committee, and I've been involved in this community. And I thought that if I wanted to make this community better every single day, I ought to leave that great government job that I loved and go run for office. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you to Julie and the DDDC for organizing this event. My name is David Fisk, and I'm an 11-year resident of McLean, a parent of 2 children in FCPS. I have a PhD in physics, and I've worked as a scientist and engineer, a manager and an owner in the small business community. I've been serving in this community for years, consistently working with and for you to make our community better. Many of you will know me from one of my leadership roles in the community, including Board of Directors and member of the Planning and Zoning Committee for McLean Citizens Association, Vice President and Coach at McLean Little League, a member of the Franklin Sherman and Haycock Elementary School PTAs, including an incoming board member at Haycock with responsibility for the DEI programming, and a leader in scouting. At the same time, I recognize that I am new to some of you. I was recruited by Dranesville Democrats to enter this race. There were several common concerns. First, experience. Many wanted a candidate who had real-world experience and experience on a wide range of county issues rather than just party insider roles. Leadership culture. Many came with stories of division, exclusion, and intimidation, the wrong DEI, within the party under Jimmy's leadership. Many of us, including some of you who have been Democrats longer than Jimmy or I have been alive, would like him to answer why he thinks he's become the sole arbiter of who is a Democrat. Campaign finance. Jimmy's reports show an unusual amount, nearly 60% of out-of-state funding, including out-of-state real estate developers. This may be a good forum for him to clarify that. Public safety. Jimmy's work on the Police Civilian Review Panel is polarizing among Democrats and out of the mainstream for the broader electorate. I hope that some of the questions will allow us to explore this more. I look forward to a lively and constructive discussion tonight, and I ask for your vote in the primary.
Okay, for the first question, we'll start with Mr. Fisk. You've both decided to seek the nomination of the Democratic Party. Why do you seek that nomination? And if you receive it and are elected, how will Democratic values inform your service as supervisor?
In terms of values, I share Democratic values with most of you. I believe in equality. I believe in justice. I believe in equal rights. I believe the environment is probably the most important issue that will be faced by my generation, and if not by mine, certainly my kids who are sitting in the back. Environmental change is going to alter the way that we live, that our kids live into the future, and there's no easy solutions for that problem at this point in time, given where we stand in terms of dependence on fossil fuels, where we stand in terms of overall population that we have to support and feed and have to provide energy for, people who want transportation on limited roads. And we have difficult choices that we're going to have to make. All of those are very mainstream Democratic values, and this is the party where I belong if I'm going to run. I made the decision to run for many of the reasons that I mentioned in the opening statement. I think that there are issues with where the local party is going in some ways in terms of what Jimmy has done in the past, and I think that the Democratic Party is the right one to lead into the future on most important issues. In terms of transportation, I mean, I think we will share a lot of points. We're going to share a belief in public transportation. We're going to share a belief in the environment. We're going to share a belief in education being a fundamental cornerstone. I appreciate the point of starting with a kind of a top-level question, but I don't think we're actually going to get any differences between the candidacies until we get lower level. It's not going to be a question of what are the values. It's going to be a question of what policies do we want to pursue to achieve those values, what trades are we going to make when we can't have everything. And I look forward to that in future questions.
Thank you. Mr. Bierman?
Thank you. Look, folks, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I've been a Democrat all my life. I didn't just wake up and decide to run as a Democrat. I got involved in the Democratic Party around here when I moved here and we bought our first house, but I've been involved in Democratic causes long before that. I'm really happy to hear that my opponent shares some of our Democratic values. This is actually news to me. Since the last time he was asked this question, he talked about reaching out to the Republicans and thinking about running as a Republican. You know who'd never have to do that? Me, this guy. I'm a Democrat because I believe in workers. I'm a Democrat because Democrats believe in science. I'm a Democrat because I believe in investing in public education. I'm a Democrat because I believe in infrastructure. It's not just Trump's week. It's not just a thing. The Democrats got it done. I'm a Democrat because I believe in protecting LGBTQ rights. I'm a Democrat because, yes, I do believe in police accountability as well as public safety. Those are Democratic values. I'm running as a Democrat because these are the values that I've always had. My opponent wrote on his website that values aren't enough. I'm sorry, folks, but values are everything. And when it comes to Democratic values, I've proven time and time again in this community that I have them. Period. Thank you.
Okay, we'll have a 30-second rebuttal. Mr. Fisk?
Well, I've been collecting my mail recently, and I've got one here from Steve Toscano addressed to me. He just told us how he wasn't recruiting Republicans. I've got Jerry Connolly and Jeff McKay, And this last one, that's you. Apparently Jimmy Bierman thinks that I am a Democrat when he wants someone to vote, but for some reason he thinks that when I want to run, I'm not. So I think I would like to know, and I think there are a lot of people out there who would like to know, Jimmy, where is the line between Democratic enough to vote for you and Democratic enough to run?
Oh, you're giving me rebuttal time?
Yes, you each get 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, wonderful, wonderful, folks. Yeah, you're right. I did send my mailer to you. Yeah, of course I did. I sent my mailer all across this county. And yeah, I sent it to people who claim to be Democrats, like this guy. Guys, this is not rocket science here. I have been a Democrat my entire life, and I have served the Democratic Party around here. This guy reached out to the Republicans to run as one, then woke up and decided he was a Democrat all of a sudden. He's never volunteered for a Democrat. He's never donated to a Democrat. He became a Democrat on the day, decided to run. Period. End of story. Thanks.
Well, yes, we'll be starting the next question with Mr. Bierman. Next question. Have your understandings of the issues and priorities changed as you've talked to voters during your campaign? And if they have, how?
Absolutely. Folks, I've knocked on over 2,500 doors all across the Dranesville district. I've talked to people in Herndon. I've talked to people in Falls Church. I've talked to people in Shouse. I've talked to people in Plain. I've talked to people in Great Falls. I've been everywhere. And there are lots of things that I hear on the doors that are really interesting. The first thing, unsurprisingly, is schools. People want to have great schools, and they want to make sure that their kids are supported, and they want to make sure their kids are learning, which means no book bans, which means they're learning history, and which means that we're not getting into crazy stuff that's coming at us from the right. The other thing that's been really surprising is the salience of affordable housing all across this district. Whether you're in Herndon, whether you're in McLean, everybody is talking about affordable housing. Whether they're older and they're worried about staying in their homes because their tax assessments are going up, whether they're younger. I'm 37 years old. Lots of folks around here who are my age can't afford to live here. Whether or not they're in the middle of the age spectrum and they're worried about the kids moving back here. I hear it over and over and over again. The other thing I hear over and over and over again is concerns about gun safety. Everyone. That's usually when I ask somebody what they care about and they look at me blankly as if they haven't thought about what they want from their local government, the first thing they go to every time is gun safety. I'm worried about my kids going to school. These are things that we can work on. These are things that we can do, and these are priorities of mine. Great schools, affordable housing, gun safety, environment, that's another thing. I hear a lot about trees. People want us to preserve trees, and I'm there. Let's redo our tree ordinance and make it better to preserve our tree canopy.
In terms of things that I learned during the campaign versus where I started, I think the number one that I learned was one that Jimmy actually mentioned, which is the affordability issue for people who already own their homes, especially people who are retired on fixed incomes, who, as Jimmy said, are worried about potentially being taxed out of their homes, especially in a year where the tax rate just spiked so much. I mean, we all hear about affordability. We've heard about it for a long time, so it was no surprise that affordability as a general issue was important in the county. But that is a specific subset of the issues and how it plays into our overall plan for how we're going to deal with affordability. That was relatively new to me. And that's something that I did incorporate into my thinking about how to go forward. I also had a chance to meet with the firefighters based on some questions that they asked. There was a quite interesting question about PFAS chemicals in their turnout gear, which some elements of the fire community are very concerned about. I met with the battalion chief. We went through kind of what are the pros and the cons. Are there alternatives to that right now? And it seems like perhaps that there aren't right now, that it is concerned, but maybe it's the least worst option. To know, though, that that's something that we need to be looking at as we think about how we're going to procure future equipment for the firefighters, for example, was new, and that you only learn that by going out and talking to people in the community who are expert in areas other than yourself. You know, Jimmy mentioned believing in science during the democratic values. Of course, I am a scientist. I have a PhD in physics, so a lot of these questions about science are very near to my heart. And I think that's one thing also that I bring to these discussions that won't be, that would be relatively unique among the board, to be able to come in and have a detailed dive on some of these issues without having to depend on staff or consultants, but to actually be able to open it up yourself and read it and understand it, and then maybe explain it to the board. So those are a couple. We're going to run out of time, but I'm hopeful we'll get some more in a little bit.
First 30-second rebuttal, Mr. Bierman.
Sure, that was a general question, and we were talking about what we heard about on the doors, but it does bring up a good point, David. Why haven't you met with any members of the board? My opponent here has spent more time meeting with Republicans about running as a Republican than he's met with the chairman, the Democratic chairman of the board about governing as a Democrat. I love that he's talking about things he's going to bring to the board. Who went around and met with all of the members of the board? I did, not my opponent. I'm ready to go to work on day one with this Board of Supervisors.
Well, it's fun that Jimmy keeps saying that I met with Republicans to run as a Republican, because that isn't actually true, and I don't believe that there's any evidence for that anywhere in the world, because it certainly didn't happen. I did consider running independent, and I think he's got a little bit of confusion about the big difference between a lifelong left-leaning independent and the way to the other side being a Republican. They are not the same. So not having a party affiliation in the past, definitely not the same. I did volunteer, by the way, for the Obama campaign, and I did donate to the campaign. I do have some history. Oh, yeah, good.
Okay, the next question. If elected, what are the top 3 things you hope to accomplish in your first term as Dranesville Supervisor, and please be specific?
All right, my top priority is to address school overcrowding in a joint process with the school board. Schools are a shared responsibility between the two boards, the Board of Supervisors and the school board. The Board of Supervisors controls the taxes that fund the schools and critically controls the land use approvals that contribute to residential growth. The school board controls the enrollment predictions and controls the capital improvement plans. We need to update this process together, understanding which parts are working and fixing the parts that are broken. We don't have to have so many trailers in this county housing classrooms for schools. There's 3 different staffs that deal with these issues over the development lifetime spread between county and schools, and in my experience, they use different terms, different methods for counting current populations, and different metrics for future growth. We need to standardize all of those, both for internal use and so that we can more clearly and transparently communicate with you, the public. Developers of large residential projects make cash contributions called proffers to offset school capital costs. I'd like to make at least 2 changes to our approach. First, proffers should be directed to schools impacted by each individual development. Proffers are meant to offset increased costs of specific developments and public services impacted by it. We're currently washing the school proffer money twice, once in the general budget of the county and once through the FCPS budget, rather than properly tracing it to end use. Second, there are often several years between land use approval and start of construction. The county currently determines capital costs at the time of approval. The school board has asked that that be determined at the time of construction, and I think that that's a reasonable approach. My second priority is to improve public safety resources. I think we might get to this later, but the police have been critically understaffed for almost a year, with minimum staffing down to 50%. We have a co-responder program, which both the police and the public want. We need to fund that fully and find staff for that. And my third priority would be to improve public transportation, potentially by offering a on-demand aspect or an on-demand component that would serve into the last mile for people who aren't close to a bus route.
Mr. Bierman.
My number 1 priority on day 1 is to have a seamless transition from John Faust's office to mine when it comes to constituent services. John Faust's office has been great with constituent services for many, many years. I've talked to members of his staff, I know what works, and I'm here to help you. That's the whole point, and that's priority number 1. On day 1, I want you to be able to call my office, and I want us to be able to get things done for you. Major priority number 2, smart development. What do I mean by that? A lot of development choices come before the Board of Supervisors. Here's how I approach them. I think first, how do we mitigate the negative environmental effects of development on both the front end and the back end? On the front end, how are we preserving more green space, preserving more tree canopy, making sure that our stormwater projections are better? On the back end, how are we incentivizing the use of green technology? How are we getting more solar panels onto public buildings, onto new apartment buildings? How are we making sure there are electric vehicle charging stations in new apartment buildings so you don't have to have a single family home to have an electric vehicle? Second aspect is smart development. How are we making sure that we're preserving and expanding upon affordable housing and housing access in this county? Are we putting in set-asides for more affordable units? Are we making sure that we're not just doing away with the only affordable units that we have? And the third part of smart development is transportation. Are we taking opportunities? We have 3 metro stations in this district. Are we making sure that we're connecting to transit corridors and utilizing those opportunities? And the third big priority is gun safety. I want to see us do a gun buyback program and get AR-15s off the street. I want to make sure we're giving out gun locks at our police stations and at police events. And I want us to pass an ordinance to keep gun stores away from school zones. Thank you.
Rebuttal, Mr. Fisk.
Yeah, those are all good priorities. I don't know that they necessarily need a rebuttal. And to some extent, we share some priorities there. I mean, I also believe in smart development. That's one of the core pillars of my platform. And understanding, with some experience, pulling from all the cases I've seen in planning and zoning and MCA, of how you deal with a developer and find the right balance between getting something for them so that they build and getting something for all of us so that it supports the community rather than just benefiting them.
Mr. Bierman.
And I agree as well. The entitlement and proffer process is really important. But let's talk about experience. Again, when we talk about experience, who is ready on day 1 to work with this Board of Supervisors? Who went around and met with members of the Board of Supervisors? Who knows that what he said about washing money in developer proffers on schools is not true? Developer proffers are tracked by schools, as he knows because he already asked for the information when he was with the MCA and got it from the school board. Thank you.
Okay, next question. Please describe your outlook on and plans to address public safety, the role of law enforcement, and any potential police reform. Mr. Bierman.
Absolutely. I spent 3.5 years on the Fairfax County Police Civilian Review Panel, providing independent oversight of the police department and working with the police department on policies and practices. In that capacity, I briefed the entire admin staff of the police department. I went in and took questions from all the top brass for an hour. In that capacity, I went and addressed cadets at the police academy. In that capacity, I made recommendations as to police policies and practices. In that capacity, I worked closely with Chief Davis, and I worked closely with Lieutenant Derek Gray, number 2 in command at the McLean District Station. I believe that having highly accountable policing is a recruiting tool for our force. Right now, I've got some good news for you about our police shortages. We've recently had the most diverse and largest recruit class that we've ever had, 54, at a time when in Montgomery County they had 20, and in PG County they had 18. It was on the front page of the Washington Post 2 weeks ago how hard it is to recruit police officers, but we're doing something right here. We increased starting salaries, we increased signing bonuses, and we're moving in the right direction. And yes, we do have a co-responder model. Ariel, can you get me some water, please? We do have a co-responder model. And the co-responder model, excuse me, folks, I'm having a Marco Rubio moment. I thought this was a Democratic debate. Well, Sebastian Gork is here, so there you go. But we have the co-responder model in which we pair mental health professionals with police officers to respond to mental health calls, which is great. It takes the element, it helps us with mental health calls by taking the element of force out of it, and it also allows us to have mental health professionals handle mental health cases, keeping our police officers still on the street.
Mr. Fisk?
Yeah, I did a police ride-along on midnight shift last Saturday, and it was eye-opening. It's quite an experience. It's open to the public. I encourage a lot of people to do it. One of the things that I learned from the police officers there was that they really are excited about this co-responder model. I think one nuanced difference between the way that I would approach something like that and the way that I often hear it approached is a lot of people call that police reform. I think that that's just unnecessarily negative towards the police. It kind of implies that they're resisting it, or that they don't want it, or that we're forcing it on them when they all want it. I mean, there's a chance in a situation like that where we all want the same thing to just take the win together and be positive and just call it adding additional resources to public safety, which was kind of along the lines of the question of what Julie asked. I think that that's a great addition to what they want and what we want. I think in a broader sense, it is good that we just had a large academy class, and of course that's true. But it's still true that for over a year, the police have been working 12-hour shifts instead of 8-hour shifts. That they're, in order even to make it on 2 shifts like that, they have minimum staffing that's 50% less than it was before the vacancy rate spiked. So we've got a long way to go. Morale, I think, is maybe improving, but I don't get the sense that the police are feeling appreciated right now. Jimmy has touted that his role at the police review panel builds trust, but it's kind of a bizarre notion of building trust, where you build a system that starts with an accusation and then you run a process by which you assume that one side is wrong. Building trust is usually a two-way process, and right now, that's not what's going on. So that is one way in which I would like to change the discussion moving forward as we deal with public safety issues.
These are all in on the Police Civilian Review Panel. We've worked together. We've had a good relationship. Having independent oversight of the police department is good for police officers. We have made recommendations to policies and practices that have helped the police. We weren't taping interrogations in this county when the Police Civilian Review Panel recommended that that happen for the protection of the police themselves. There's a reason why I've been invited to address the cadet class. There's a reason why I've been invited to use of force training. It's working, and we need to continue doing it.
Not right now, but sometime over the next few days, I would love to see Jimmy substantiate that claim that the police are all in on this panel. He may find statements that are neutral because they're county employees and they're subject to their employment agreements. I am going to find it difficult to believe that he is going to find a member of the police union, a member of the command staff, or the chief outright saying that they love that committee.
I need to answer that because that one's easily verifiable. That one's easily verifiable, folks. Okay, but that one's easily verifiable. We have it on tape.
One moment,
I'll tell you where
quick
to find
equipment check. We're good? Sure? Okay. Okay, next question. As supervisor, how would you protect the rights and well-being of LGBTQ residents, especially those of transgender children and youth?
I think we have really all of the tools that we need for that in some sense. It's more of a question of do we apply the tools rather than do we need more. We have equal rights laws at the federal, state, and local level. Those laws protect all people regardless of any protected category. And this is a protected category under the state and local law. I think that the schools in particular, where there seems to be, I'm going to use the word culture war issue right now. I think the schools were perfectly well able to handle this. They had, they have counselors in place. They know how to talk to students of all different types who are experiencing all manner of life changes and life discovery. And it's really unfortunate that it's kind of become a flashpoint, that people from really both sides have gone in and kind of made these children who are at a point in their life probably where they don't want to be in the limelight. They don't want to be a bumper sticker or on a poster, and are just forcing them to be the center of this debate. I think if we just calm down a little bit, we'll be able to handle what we need to handle almost without too much work. Now there may be individual issues where we got to go in and look at something specific, but overall, I think it's really more about just fostering an overall culture of respect at the schools, in the county, when we deal with other people. It doesn't all have to be law. It's just, part of it is just going out and being a good person ourselves. And I think that, and I'm going to go ahead and say, I think Jimmy will do the same. I think we go out and we live our lives and we try to treat people with respect. And I think that probably most people in this room do the same. That is the number one way.
Again, I'm encouraged to hear a lot of agreement with my opponent on this issue. It absolutely is about respect. I look in the back and I see John Faust, who actually was instrumental in passing one of the first LGBTQ ordinances to protect LGBTQ rights in this county at a time when they weren't even sure that the state would let him do it. He stood up. He stood up for that community, and he stood up for those kids. Now, here's where I actually really differ, though, with my opponent. He talks about both sides. I don't think it's both sides, folks. I respect kids. I respect trans kids. I respect our LGBTQ community. I want to empower people to be the best version of themselves. And I will use my bully pulpit to stand up for those kids at every step of the way against bullies. My opponent thinks that's a both sides issue. It's not a both sides. We know where it's coming from. It's coming from the people who signed the petition to get my opponent on the ballot. This is about values. It absolutely is about values. I was standing outside of the polling place at McLean Government Center the other day. I had my son with me. He's 2.5 years old. Some woman comes up to me and says, "You've got trans porn in schools." Yeah, it was ugly, folks. She told me I was a very damaged person, that I was pro-groomer, and that she was going in to vote against me. Come on. This is pretty simple. There's one side here, and that's protecting kids and empowering kids. And there are a lot of people who don't want to do it. We need to call that out. We need to not be afraid to call it out. That's not being divisive, that's being honest. Thank you.
Yeah, well, if I had encountered that voter, I certainly would have had words with that voter. I don't approve of what you said, and I mean, we can't help what other people are going into the polls and saying. So I'm sorry that you had that experience, and I'm sorry that she holds those views. Those views are not acceptable, and I guess in that sense, I'm not rebutting what you're saying. I'm agreeing with you. That's not the way it should be. And as I said, in specific cases, and as we encounter those things, we do need to stand up to that.
Thank you, David. I'll hold you to that. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
Okay, our next question is about transportation. Transportation obviously remains a major issue in Dranesville and countywide. Deteriorating roads, slow-moving public works projects, gridlock, and a lack of public transit options. What are your plans to address this problem? Yes, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was out knocking on doors right off of Dranesville Road in Herndon. and I knocked on the door of a guy who told me he worked for the Department of Transportation, the Department of Transportation, the one across the river. And he was really excited that Metro was coming to Herndon. But there was no reliable bus service to get him down Dranesville Road to get on the Metro. So he was really excited because once he got to the Metro, he might be able to get himself all the way to Navy Yard to the DOT headquarters, but there's no reliable bus service to get him there. And that is not an atypical story. That's a typical story in this county. And we need to continue building upon our bus service. We need to find and create transit corridors. We need to make it easier to get around. We need to make it easier to get from downtown McLean to the Metro. I know there's a bus, it only comes every 15 minutes. We need to make these locations where you can connect to Metro and get where you need to go. And another component of that, by the way, is we need to work on bike lanes. We need to work on getting people places on 2 wheels, not just 4. We need to work on pedestrian opportunities and pedestrian safety. You need to be able to walk your kids to school around here. You need to be able to have the option not to get into a single occupancy vehicle. And a lot of people don't have that option. I don't have that option. I live by the most expensive gas station in the Commonwealth of Virginia, Kirby 123. There is no bus to get me anywhere. There is no sidewalk. There is no opportunity to get around. And that's a problem. We need to continue building upon and finding the money for such opportunities. And that's absolutely something I want to work on as supervisor. Thank you.
So I'll start on a couple things I agree with. So I agree that we need to improve bike lanes. We need to improve pedestrian options. And I know that's something that John Krause has worked on for a long time, and it's just because of the way the county works, it's difficult. But I know that he's fought for us, and I think either one of us probably would continue to fight for that. Bike lanes in particular is an important part of the downtown McLean plan, the design guidelines, and I think that over time will be coming. That's one of the things that as you look at the overall process of development, all of the pieces have to come together. You have to understand how you're incentivizing developers, but also how they're going to provide pieces of that through proffers or through smart development and so on. Now, one spot where I agree but I'm going to deviate is it is difficult to get to the major transit routes. But we're not going to be able to solve that to all of the neighborhoods by running full-size buses that are mostly empty down residential streets. So one thing that I've talked about, and I think that it'll take a while, but I think that we need to look into, is having some way in which we expand the transportation options such that you have smaller vehicles running on a more on-demand type system. For lack of a better description, something like a public transportation Uber, right? So you have a way in which you don't have to wait in front of your own house on a small, curvy, hilly road to get a bus, but you connect to that transportation network by asking for a smaller vehicle to come through when you need it, and taking you out into the major transportation lanes. So that's not an exclusion to the other options, but it's an additional piece that connects to those options and makes that last mile more accessible to more people in an environmental and road-friendly way.
Well, I've talked to my wife about that last one. She worked at Uber for 4.5 years. Look, that's a nice idea, but ultimately what it comes down to is improving our transportation infrastructure across the board. And on that, I hope that my opponent and I agree. We need to continue doing that. I don't think that on-demand options are necessarily realistic, but I think that if we could get there, sure, why not? But ultimately, it's about investing in our public transportation and having more buses, more bike lanes, and more sidewalks. And that, I think we agree on.
Right, and I'm just going to go back to the piece where I think we disagree, which is you just can't run a full-size bus on every residential street in the county. It doesn't make sense. Both because the roads won't take it and because there's not going to be enough demand to justify that sort of a vehicle going everywhere. So we're going to have to look outside the box, and we're going to have to look at other options. But I do think that on many of the broad ideas, we do agree on this point.
Okay, I think we're gonna have time, we're gonna fit in 2 more questions. So our second to last pre-prepared question is on housing. How will you address the severe shortage of affordable housing in Fairfax County?
Right, so the county has a commitment to make to build 10,000 affordable units over roughly the next decade, and so I support that, and I'm sure that Jimmy's going to say he supports that too. There's other aspects to the overall equation though, right? That's a piece of the supply. There's also demand, and there's also the income piece that contributes to affordability, and I'd like us to look at the other components to that in addition. So in terms of demand, I think we have to take a look at how we're doing our development. We're at a time where we don't necessarily need to continue to follow an urban model where we concentrate all of the jobs in one section of the county, which then overvalues the housing right around it because people want to live close to their jobs. Right? If we can take advantage of remote work, for example, in order to distribute those jobs, we can spread out some of the demand issues, not maybe in total, but in a local by local basis, which is how the real estate values are driven up. So that's a piece on the demand side. I also think we need to be a little bit careful about how we structure our economic development plans. So I think economic development has been cast as a bomb for this problem that is going to solve the problem. But I've been a hiring manager in small business, and it is 100% possible to have high unemployment and high vacancy rates if the skills are mismatched. So if we're having trouble with affordability, one thing we're going to have to look at is if we're bringing in jobs that are going to match the skill set of the people who we're trying to make housing affordable to. And then the other side of that same issue is that we need to invest in training for people whose skills are going to be mismatched so that they can fill those jobs, so that when we have a new business come in, we're not just bringing new people in from outside the region and displacing the people that we have here or driving up their costs, but that we're actually able to fill those jobs with the people here who need that income in order to be able to move into, say, market rate housing.
My opponent's right. I do support 10,000 units in the next decade. I'd like us to continue building upon that, and I'd like us to try and exceed it. I like to make the joke about Fairfax County. It's got the Yogi Berra problem. Yogi Berra said that restaurant's so crowded nobody goes there anymore. In Fairfax County, that county's so expensive nobody can afford to live there anymore. We need to continue investing in affordable housing and moving in the direction that John Faust took us as head of the Housing Committee. I would like to see us pass a meals tax to raise revenue both for our schools and for housing. A meals tax could bring in $100 million in revenue. $50 million of that could go right into our affordable housing fund. I'd like to see us getting more affordable housing in proffers. I'd like us also to get contributions from developers to our affordable housing fund. I actually agree with David. We do need to be working on incomes in this county and on jobs in this county. That's why I'm proud to be endorsed by the Electrical Workers Union, by the Pipe Fitters Union, by the Laborers International Union, by basically every union, frankly, because they know that I want to work on workforce development programs in this county. They know that I think that the WISH Center, which opened up in South County, the Workforce Innovation and Skills Hub, to teach people about everything from welding to other jobs that you might not have to go to college for, was a good thing. They know that I support prevailing wage laws, which have been passed in this county to make sure that people are not subject to wage theft and are not getting paid the way they should so that they can afford to live here. So absolutely, I'm with my opponent on that one. The only difference is that the unions are with me.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add on the meals tax because that goes to something that we talked about earlier on about affordability for people who already live here and are in danger of being taxed out of their homes. One of the things that we're stuck with is, as a county due to state law, is that we're very limited in how we can tax. And property taxes is a blunt instrument. It affects people neighborhood by neighborhood, not home by home and not income by income. So having another tax base would be extremely useful for being able to combat some of those issues.
And there's where I also agree with our opponent, except I'm already working on it. I see Rip Sullivan in the back. We've got a thread going about how we can change state law to make us, at the county level, have more opportunities to diversify our revenue streams and to change the way we do property taxes so that we aren't trying to run a county of 1.1 million people on the backs of individual homeowners, because it's not working. We do need to diversify our revenue streams, and that is going to take state level involvement, which is why I'm already talking to members of the state legislature about how we're going to get it done.
Okay, final question here and the prepared questions. Dranesville contains a wide range of people and communities, and the needs and wants of residents in, for example, Great Falls may differ considerably from those of residents in Herndon. How do you plan to balance the needs of different communities? You are.
Yeah, so at the beginning of all this, my opponent talked about his real world experience, and he attacked me as supposedly not having it. That's ridiculous, folks. I have real world experience, my opponent has real world experience, and everyone in this room has real world experience. We all live in this community. The person who I met on the doors in Herndon, who was worried about workers at her hotel being able to live here, she has real world experience. The person I talked to in Great Falls wants to make sure that the one-lane bridge stays intact. She has real world experience. The person I met in Pivot Hills, worried about his kids going to school because of guns, he has real world experience. The folks that I met in Linway Terrace who want to see flashing lights at the crosswalk across Kirby Road, they have real world experience. The folks on Churchill Road who I met yesterday who were worried about cut-through traffic and that the speed humps weren't doing enough, they have real world experience. The fact of the matter is, I've been all over this district. I've knocked on 2,500 doors. I've met people in every single corner. And I understand that the real world experience that matters to do this job is not just mine, it's yours. It's yours, because you have to come to us. And we have to figure out how to balance lots and lots of priorities. And frankly, going back to my personal experience, having lived in this community for 37 years, more or less, having grown up here, having served as chair of the Dranesville District Democratic Committee, or as I like to call it, herding cats, having been on the Fairfax Police Civilian Review Panel working on policing issues that affect the entire county. I didn't coach Little League, I played Little League, folks. I've got the experience to balance the many interests of all across this district, and that's what I'm going to do.
So in broad terms, there's basically three regions of the district. You've got Herndon in the west, you've got Great Falls in the center, you've got McLean over here in the east. McLean, I recognize a lot of faces here, so there's a lot of McLean people here. We are mostly urban, suburban in this area. Great Falls has a mission, especially at GFCA, of maintaining their semi-rural nature. They don't even want public sewer in Great Falls in order to ensure that they maintain that character. And then you've got Herndon, which is a little bit farther out to the west. I would say it's a little bit more progressive. It's maybe not quite as affluent, but it still has a very great character and a great spirit. One thing that I do bring is, not having lived in McLean my entire life, is I've actually lived in places that are like each one of those areas. I grew up in a rural, semi-rural part of Ohio. I'm from upstate New York originally, spent a lot of summers up there in suburban and more urban areas, and of course I've lived in McLean for 11 years, so I'm very familiar with McLean as it stands now and probably where we're going into the near future. So one thing that I would bring specific to the question about how I would be able to balance the needs of the three communities is that I think that I can relate to people in each of the three communities in the frame of mind that they view their own section of Dranesville. Because I've been that person before. I've been the high-rise person. I've been, the semi-rural person. I know what it means to have well water, right? I know what it means also to deal with urban traffic. And so going out and being able to meet with those people, talk about what they want, and then to be able to bring those back with staff at the Dranesville level, and then bring it up to the board, I think is something I'd be very prepared to do.
My mom and dad are smiling because I also know what it means to have well water. I grew up in a house with one on the edge of McLean. Sure, exactly. You got to get all over the district. You got to meet people from every walk of life. You got to put in the work and the time. I'm a guy who does it. I've done it for years. Before I ran for office myself, I knocked on doors for a heck of a lot of candidates. That's why I've got support from politicians in Herndon, why I got the support in Great Falls, why I got the support in McLean, why I got the support in Falls Church. I got all of their support because I've been around this district over and over and over again, meeting people, getting to know them, and getting ready to represent them.
Yeah, and I'll just go back to, in some sense, agreeing with Jimmy in that it is about putting in the work and going out and meeting with people. I have spent the last 2 months going out and meeting with individual people, but also making connections with nonprofits, with religious institutions across the district. I've been active in the McLean Citizens Association, of course, so I have deep roots there, but also trying to meet people from Great Falls Civic Association in order to have a network to understand and have things bubble up so we know what we need to do.
Okay, we are going to move into audience questions. Obviously, we're only going to be able to get to a few in 15 minutes. So, let me I saw the first hand up was over there.
Can I ask? Can I come up?
If you'd like to come up and ask it, that's fine. It depends how.
Seems to be more. Okay. This is addressed. Oh, sorry. This is addressed to Jimmy Bierman. In 2022, there was an election for the McLean board. The Democrats took it upon themselves to endorse candidates for what was a nonpartisan election. I have never met Jimmy Bierman. He sent a letter out endorsing all the candidates that they endorsed, saying that those who were not endorsed were right-wingers. I have been a Democrat back to 1956. I was born in 46. I stuffed envelopes for Adlai Stevenson. I either am or will be the last reporter left from the Eugene McCarthy 1968 campaign, who was with the McCarthy campaign on the night of McCarthy, the night of the primary, when Lyndon Johnson withdrew. And there may be one other person who's still left. I was writing for my college newspaper. In the letter, Mr. Bierman accused me of being a right-winger. I don't appreciate that. I don't appreciate the Dranesville. I'm going to ask the question. The question is whether it was appropriate to send that letter and trash fellow Democrats, because it wasn't just me. Of the 11 candidates running, 9 were Democrats, and they endorsed 3, including one person whose entire speech to the McLean Citizens Association was about drag queen story hour and how she hated it. So I'm asking him whether it was appropriate for the Dranesville Democrats and you too from getting involved in a nonpartisan election.
To clarify, please sit down, man. We will allow both candidates to respond to all questions, no matter who it's directed towards.
So folks, you know what's hard about being a politician? Sometimes people come up and lie to your face. And that's what just happened. The Dranesville District Democratic Committee did not endorse any candidates in that race. I was not in a leadership position in the Dranesville District Democratic Committee. I sent an email to my friends that did not mention my association with the Dranesville District Democratic Committee. I did not name a single person in that email. I talked about the people who I supported. If you want to see the email, come find me afterwards. I'll pull it up on my phone. You can read it. What was just said was a lie. It was a bald-faced lie. Now, the deal is that you take this job and you listen to everybody. You let them finish their lies, but here's the thing. You don't have to take it. It was perfectly appropriate for me, a citizen of McLean, to support the candidates I wanted to support in the MCC election. End of story. Thank you very much.
So I guess the question to me is whether it was appropriate for him to send the letter.
I sent an email to my friends.
I think his answer was a little bit evasive in the sense that he tried to sneak out on a technicality about whether he was currently the chair or not. And I don't know whether that was relevant to the main point of the question, that he apparently has a history of going after fellow Democrats and calling them Republicans, which, I don't know, I feel like I heard that recently. I'm not sure where. Sometimes I get a little tired. I've been doing it on the campaign trail here for a little while, but I feel like I heard that sometime within the last couple of days. In terms of whether it's appropriate to be for a party official or even a former party official to be sending out an email in the MCC election, I gotta say no to that. I know that a lot of people out there feel very strongly the same way. It's a nonpartisan role. It's meant to be nonpartisan. And if parties are going to keep getting involved in the MCC election specifically, at some point, we're going to lose control of the MCC board. Either the county's going to come in and say it's just such a mess, they're going to take it away from us, or we're going to have to do something which we don't want to do, like subject the campaigns to campaign finance limitations. If there's going to be money poured into these campaigns, right? At some point, we just have to say that some things are nonpartisan. Right. If you think it's okay to have a party endorsement for MCC, is it going to become okay to have a party endorsement for a PTA? I mean, just at some point, there's a line where we're just all citizens on the same basis. Now, in terms of the contents of the letter, I mean, I think Jimmy's volunteered to show that to you, so he'll have to follow through on that. I don't have a comment on that.
I have it on my phone if anybody else.
Guys, I just want to take a second here to point out how absurd what my opponent just said was. I sent an email to my friends saying who I was supporting. You think that's a problem? You think it's a problem to tell your friends who you're going to support in the election? On what planet do you spend most of your time? This is America, folks. I mean, come on. I sent an email to my friends about who I was supporting. My opponent thinks that's a problem. Boy, that's a laugher.
Right, and I understand the complaint to be, and this is the complaint, I agree with it, not that he supported someone, but that he sent out an email that called all of the other Democrats in the race right-wingers. That's
Which
not,
didn't happen.
That is not the
Copy
same.
of the letter.
Okay.
I think maybe we just let that one go, maybe people will see the letter later.
Okay, yeah. Trying to, yeah, obviously, there's a lot more questions.
The
than
next
time.
controversial
Okay.
subject.
Change the subject.
Hi, Carla Post.
Do you want to come to the,
No, I think
okay.
for the video. I was surprised to hear neither of you talk about women's rights, reproductive rights of women and childcare.
Yeah, we need a mic.
Here's the mic.
All right. We did touch on that, but I was surprised to hear that neither of you spoke about women's rights, reproductive rights, childcare access, which is there's a major childcare crisis going on, not just in America, but in Fairfax County as well. Access to pre-K, et cetera. So I'd really like to hear both of you address that. Actually, I would have liked to have heard that addressed. I know you got a lot of issues, but I would have liked to, given what we're going through right now, have heard that in the beginning.
Right, yeah, so to some extent we were driven by the questions we were asked, and I appreciate you asking the questions so that now we do have a chance to address it. So childcare is an issue throughout the county. Affordable childcare, access to child, even unaffordable childcare at this point is an issue in the county. It is difficult to find childcare at all, and that is something that we're going to have to do something about. I think this is probably an example where we might need a little bit of help from the state because I'm not sure that we're going to have the county resources to do it. There are licensing issues. It's kind of a difficult business to get into, and we're going to have to maybe provide some support for that type of business. Reproductive rights you mentioned, that's not really regulated at the county level, so it's not so much a county issue, but I mean, I think probably, well, I don't think probably, I am sure that we're both pro-choice, and not that there's necessarily going to be an act coming up in the county where that's going to be an issue, but if it does, I think we're probably both on the same page there. You asked, what was the third thing you asked about? Childcare, reproductive rights, and women and equality. You asked about equality, and I think I did touch on that briefly, maybe not as hard as I should have when we talked about democratic values. So I definitely believe in equality in all aspects. My daughter and my wife are both sitting over there. I want my daughter to grow up and have every opportunity that my son has, who's also sitting over there. I think the one advantage that we have right now at this point in history that we didn't have even when I was a kid is we have the ability to just start fresh with some of these kids. There are so many opportunities now that we can just treat them equal, and they're going to grow up in that environment believing that to some extent. Now we will have to go back sometimes and address some things. It's not perfect, but I mean, we have to always look at what we can do better, but we also at some point have to look at what's been accomplished by the generations before us, and we have made strides over multiple generations, even in my lifetime, and I'm not that old.
Thank you for your question. Yes, in some ways the way the questions were posed drove things because the first question was what you could accomplish in 4 years. And I'm not sure I can accomplish it in 4 years, but I've been very, very vocal on the campaign trail and everywhere that I want to build on John Faust's legacy and expand access to universal pre-K. John was instrumental in helping us move from half-day kindergarten to full-day kindergarten. I think we can get to universal pre-K. Now it's going to take a lot of money, it's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to be difficult. I was surprised when I was at the NAACP forum this weekend. I talked about this, and immediately afterwards, Dahlia Palchuk, Providence District Supervisor, came over to me and said, let's do it. And actually, the first conversation I had was with James Walkinshaw, Braddock District Supervisor, who said he wanted to see universal pre-K as well. So that is absolutely a priority of mine. That's 3 out of 10. I got to get to 6. But that is going to help families. It's going to help young families. It's going to help teachers. It's going to help kids. When it comes to child care issues, I also talked to James about that. There is a new affordable housing unit going in right by the government center, and James worked really hard to make sure that there would be child care in that affordable housing unit. So if we can expand access to child care in our affordable housing locations, that's great. And when it comes to women's rights, yeah, David's right. I am pro-choice. I'd like to note something. We do not have a Planned Parenthood in all of Fairfax County. We don't have a Planned Parenthood in all of Northern Virginia. Now, I worked with Planned Parenthood in Metro Washington on the Advocates Council and on the Leadership Council, and I know that they want to put a Planned Parenthood somewhere in Northern Virginia. They have one in PG County, they have one in DC, they have one in Gaithersburg, but I think that it would be great to bring a Planned Parenthood to Fairfax County. Thank you.
tying this back to something we talked about earlier in terms of differences in the regions, one thing that I heard clearly when I went to Herndon in terms of schools, but bearing on your question, is people in Herndon, for the most part that I talk to, seem happy with their school during the day. But the issue is, where do those kids go after school in homes where maybe people are working 2 jobs and aren't going to be there or don't have the after-school activities. So I think expanding SAC would be helpful, and also partnering with nonprofits to expand opportunities after school.
And I'll agree with that as well. And I don't need the 30 seconds, I agree with that.
Okay, let's do another question. First, Hannah Saab. Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm James Trout. I'm a local. I've been living and working here at Dranesville District for the last 4 years. I'm a man diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and mild form of autism, and despite lifelong social difficulties, managed to get a BA from American University and an MA from George Mason University in Public and Political Science and Transportation Policy, respectively. My question for the two of you is it's a two-part question, and it is as follows. What experience do both of you have with the disability community in general, and should you get elected to the position, what is your plan to increase job opportunities and job prospects for people with disabilities? I'm admittedly one of the lucky ones, but I want people like me to be the rule and not the exception. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, James. I'll tell you about one of my favorite clients, the American Council for the Blind. When I was in private practice, I worked with the American Council for the Blind to get a law passed in West Virginia to allow blind individuals to vote on their cell phones using voice-assisted technology so that they could vote independently and privately in their homes. I had a guy who said to me, look, I'm a Democrat in West Virginia. When I voted for Barack Obama, I didn't want anybody else filling out my ballot for me. So I worked with the American Council for the Blind, and they were a great client. I think that it gets down to supporting our social services at the county level, making sure that we are providing great services to people across the county, to people with disabilities, to people who are struggling with mental illness, to people who are struggling with addiction, to people who need extra help. It's about having a county that is really there for everybody across the board. I see Mark Albert sitting in the second row there, chairman of the ARC of Northern Virginia, and a supporter of mine, working with partnerships with groups like the ARC of Northern Virginia, making sure that the county is ready to help people and to take on those issues, making sure that it doesn't matter where you live, who you are, where you're from, whether you've got a disability or not a disability, making sure that we have equity across the board. That's what running this county is about. That's why it's important that we continue to attract great county employees. That's why it's important that we continue to fund the programs that we have across the board. And that is absolutely a priority of mine going forward.
Right, and so we agree that opportunities need to be provided, but the question was really how do you do it? And I think that there are a couple aspects to that. One is ensuring that in schools we have opportunities that are catering to needs or making accommodations that are going to help people fully, as youth, benefit from their educational experience while they're in school. That's at the younger level. I think that we have a lot of those programs in place, but we need to be vigilant. We need to make sure that we're constantly evaluating to see if we can do better or where we can do better. As people move into the workforce, I think, and I think your story spoke to this, it becomes a little bit more difficult because you leave the structure of the school system and now you have to be more out on your own, right? And so I think that providing programs that are going to support that transition, and it may depend on what, the nature of the disability and how independent people can be, but supporting people as they leave the structure of the schools to be able to go out and live on their own, to be able to get a job, to help them understand what jobs are going to be appropriate, right? We need to make reasonable accommodations, of course, and we do. That's the law, and I think that people do it. But some jobs may be more suitable for some disabilities than others, and it's, I think, also relevant to have some counseling and some support that helps you figure that out as you move forward and you navigate moving out on your own. Some people may need that support for a long time. Some people may just need it as a transition. And I think that we need to be able to have a program that's going to be flexible enough to understand the difference, help people through, and if you can get out on your own, and I applaud you for what you said you've accomplished. If you get out on your own, that's great. That's a success of the program. If you don't need that support anymore, that's wonderful. For people who need it, we need to continue that a little bit longer.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about also finding opportunities to work with the state as well. Because I know that a lot of these programs, and this is something I've heard about on the doors, a lot of these programs are funded by the state. They're funded for money that comes down through the federal government to the state. A lot of Medicaid programs help with these issues as well. And so it's really important to, again, have great county staff to build upon these programs and to make sure that we are connecting with people at the state level as well to support our disability community.
This is another question where maybe there's not a ton of difference between us. I think we generally agree that we need to be supportive, we need to partner. State and federal is important, as Jimmy said. I think also nonprofit and faith communities where it makes sense, where that matches up with the individual beliefs of the people who are involved. So again, I don't necessarily feel like we have to disagree on everything. I think this is a point where we do have common values and we can move forward.
Okay, at this time, we are going to move into the closing statements because we are pretty well past 60 minutes. So they're going to be 2 minutes each, and we will start with Mr. Fisk and end with Mr. Bierman.
I really appreciate you all coming out tonight. This has been a great discussion. I feel like this is the first time that we've really been able to get in depth on the issues. This is a grueling process. I know there are many elected officials out there. I see John Faust out there who went through this I don't know how many times. I don't know how you did it. Enjoy your retirement. It is difficult being out in front of everyone. You get a lot of great questions. You get a lot of people who are very concerned about the future. You also get a lot of people, not a lot of people, but a few people who feel like there are a lot of people sometimes who just want to come up and yell. And it's all about being able to work through that. But this tonight has been really a constructive discussion. We've been able to talk about the issues. I feel like we've been able to agree on many things, which I think is important. I mean, despite the rhetoric, we do have common values in most respects. And it's more about how we differ on how we want to implement policies or prioritize what we're going to do next in the next 4 years in this county. And this is the first time we've really been able to sit down and do it. I wish we could have had 3 of these. When I asked, I wanted to do one in McLean, one in Great Falls, and one in Herndon, so that we would have an opportunity to be in front of a greater cross-section of the district. It didn't work out with timing. Jimmy only wanted to do one, and I think the committee said they only had bandwidth to do one. But I hope that people who didn't make it out from Great Falls and Herndon will have a chance to watch the video to see where we stand. And regardless of where you vote, I mean, go out and vote in the primary, vote in the general election, and at the end of the day, we're all going to still live in this community. So I just hope that as we go into these last few days, we'll be able to have a civil discourse and we move on together.
Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to the Dranesville District Democratic Committee for putting this debate together. Thank you to my campaign manager, my parents, my wife, and my son who are not here. thank you to everyone. This is a grueling process, and thank you to David for running. Now, this night started out with me talking about why I decided to run, me talking about democracy. And then it started out with my opponent attacking me for being a Democrat, for being a member of the Dranesville District Democratic Committee, for going after me for running the committee around here. He's attacked me for telling my friends who I thought we should vote for. He's attacked me for repeating words that he said at a meeting about reaching out to Republicans. But at the end of the day, the reason to vote for me, there really are three reasons. Reason number one is credibility. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I've been in this community forever. You know my values. I share your values, and that's why you should vote for me. Secondly, it's experience. I've been all over this community. I've worked at the county level on the Police Civilian Review Panel. I've knocked on doors everywhere. I have listened to people, and that is what this job is about. And the last big reason is readiness on day one. When I got into this race, I went around and I met with every member of the Board of Supervisors, except for Harry. But I met with all the Democrats on the Board of Supervisors. I sat down with Jeff McKay. I sat down with Kathy Smith. I sat down with James Walkinshaw. I could go on. I looked around the county and I found areas of agreement. Dolly Palchik and I want to work on affordable housing and early childhood education. Dan Stork and I want to work on putting utilities underground. Kathy Smith and I want to work on affordable housing and housing for teachers. I went and did it. I'm ready to go on day one, and I'm ready to fight for you. Thank you very much for being here.
All right, before we really close debate, we did have our executive director from Fairfax County Dems is here, Dominic Thompson. He wanted to say a word.
Hi there, everyone. My name, as Julie said, is Dominic Thompson. I'm the new executive director for the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to say two things. First of all, I wanted to give a round of applause to our candidates who are running. It is grueling work to run for office, and it's a lot harder than you make it look. But secondly, I just wanted to remind everyone that at the end of the day, we are just one party. We have these primaries. We have so many varying thoughts on how to address the issues of our community, but we have the same values. And we're going to vote during this primary, but on June 21st, we have to come together and be united in one party again. So thank you all for coming out here, and go vote.
Thank you, well said.